Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have someone from over the pond again. we've had a slew of international guests, which I'm super excited about because I love hearing about other people's experiences from all over the world. Today we have Mike Monaghan. I'm gonna pause it right there. Is that how you say your last name? I didn't even ask.
That's okay. It's Monaghan. It does. I've heard worse. Monaghan is good.
Well, how do you actually pronounce it?
Monaghan.
Okay, Monaghan.
The G
Okay.
silent. Yeah.
Okay, so I did pronounce it right then. Okay, I'm just gonna start it all over again.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have someone from across the pond on, which I'm very excited about because we've had a slew of international people on lately. Today we have Mike Monaghan from Kirkham, England on today. He's the business owner of Auto Motivate. Mike, how you doing today?
Well, good afternoon for me, and good morning, I'm sure, for you, Adam. Thank you for doing it. Great to be part of this, and yeah, looking forward to our chat. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Not a problem. Yes, it is. So I'm in Central Standard Time Zone, so it's 6 hours difference between me and you. So yeah, thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to do this.
No problem at all.
So Mike, how we normally start this off is, we like to ask about, what young Mike was like. How did you get into this crazy industry of the auto body style industry or the car industry? So were you always kind of into cars as a kid? Like, what kind of motivated you to get into the industry?
Well, great question, Adam. And the real answer to this is it's very bizarre for me because my dad, throughout his entire life, never owned or drove a car.
Okay.
And yet, I think from birth, I was a petrol head.
Oh, nice.
And one of my earliest memories was my mum saying to me that she almost knew that I was destined to go into the automotive industry when one of my dinky cars, she caught me with one of her nail varnishes painting one of my dinky cars. So wherever that came from, I don't know. But yeah, I think I was a petrol head from birth and probably always mechanically minded. Just really good with my hands, whether it was fixing my bicycle or whether it was building something. And that was my world and my fascination. And I think outside of that, I was a speed junkie. There's just no denying that. And as you can see from the pictures on my wall, my absolute passion is two wheels. But yeah, I got into cars early doors. I just had a love for it, and I'm 64 years of age now, and I still love it as much today as I did then, and that will never change. Yeah, it started. I then continued in the industry, and I was fortunate enough to become an apprentice motor engineer with Jaguar Land Rover. So I did my time served status, a 4-year indentured apprenticeship. And I suppose, like all young guns, I became ambitious and flirty and decided that I would really love to have my own shop. So I did, and I got my first shop, and that spectacularly failed because I knew how to fix cars. I just didn't know how to run a business. But we bounced back, and eventually I ended up with 3 body shops and a couple of garages as well, doing the mechanical repairs, and loved it. But my experience grew, Adam, and I started to very quickly realise that there was an awful lot of body shops in my hometown that I simply would not trust to fix a wheelbarrow. And very quickly, from having a very structured and regimented apprenticeship with Jaguar Land Rover, realised that there was no regulatory framework to stop anyone opening a shop.
Mm.
And so I introduced these challenges to various official bodies and realized that there was just no barriers to entry. And, and in that time, that frustration grew and grew until 1988, when I thought something has to be done about this. And that was when I formed the Motor Vehicle Repairers Association, and that was to provide a framework for body shops to climb on board and prove their level of professionalism, to demonstrate their skill, their quality, their equipment, their standards, their welding techniques, the whole 9 yards. And that really was my entry into the industry. At that level, and then I ran the MVRA for over 25 years. I sold out to a FTSE 100 corporation, and they completely killed it, but that's a story for another day.
Well, you never know. We have an hour. Like this could be that could be a story for right now.
So yeah, well, that was it was. That was an incredible journey, Adam, to invest 25 years of your life into a business that became internationally recognized, and then you thought you'd done the right thing and you'd reached your exit point, your exit strategy, and then realized that this corporate behemoth took the business over, and in less than 1 year decided they didn't want to play in that field anymore and just closed it down.
Wow.
And it was devastating. It was truly devastating. But that then moved me on to where I am today. I started to look at everything that our industry has to offer, but also everything that I'd witnessed in those 40 years. And whether we were doing Kaizen or process or lean or fast or smart, and realize that we've got great techniques and great equipment and everything else, but the one thing that powers and drives it all is people. And we just have not understood the biggest factor that affects performance in the shop, and that's people. So I moved into everything that was sort of around psychology, mindset development, cognitive development improvements, and just human performance, understanding culture, mindset, behaviors, attitudes. And that's my world today. So I'm still 100% automotive, always will be. If you cut me, I will bleed like a body guy. But you know, there's still a lot of area and a lot of room for help, and that's the space I occupy today.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit back to your dad not having a car. Now, as Americans, like that is just blasphemy. Like
that is unheard of, isn't it? Right?
It is. So like, did you guys live somewhere where there was like easy walkable distances or like great public transportation? Like, what was the deal there?
All right. So so if you take the name Monaghan, you don't have to dig too hard to realize that that is Irish.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah.
my dad was from Ireland, County Sligo in Ireland, and from my dad's area, there was no need for cars. And his generation, if you had a pony and trap, that was all you needed.
Interesting.
And I think he carried that throughout his entire life. He wasn't against cars, because eventually my mum, who was the one who eventually ended up driving and having the cars, so it was great. We did have a car eventually, but as far as my dad was concerned, pony and trap was all that was required, and anything else was just ego.
Interesting. That is actually really interesting.
Yeah.
So what was your guys' first car then? Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around this because one, that's phenomenal in the way that you guys must have just saved loads of money from not having to pay insurance or repair bills or paying gas, like, or petrol. Like it's
Yeah.
got to be a great way to live as far as like saving money. But the
Well,
one time that I went out to, sorry to interrupt, the one time that I went out to London, so I visited my business partner out there once,
yeah, yeah.
and one of the things that I realized was, obviously you live way north of London, so it might not be the same up there, but you could feasibly kind of live your whole life within a couple of blocks section. There's lots of different restaurants and grocery places and barbers and everything like that, all within like a couple of blocks of where most people live. So did you guys kind of have a similar setup, or what was the deal?
Wherever you travel the world, Adam, I think most of the world is that way. The one thing, certainly within the UK, we despite our own criticisms of it naturally, because we have that right to criticize our own infrastructure. But when you've traveled the world, we really do have an incredible transport infrastructure. So the car is more a luxury than a necessity.
Mm.
But we still love our car. Make no mistake, we are still a lover of the motor vehicle. We are, and we always will be. So it really is. Do you technically need one? No, you can get around. We do have a great transport infrastructure. From my father's generation, it was more, yeah, he had 8 miles, just 8 miles to go to work. But he would use his bicycle or the bus. So yeah, it certainly, I'm sure it did keep the family expenses down with a growing young family. But my mum, I suppose, in fairness, Adam, as you reflect in your later years, it was probably my mum that was the more ambitious. My dad, my mum wanted to explore the world and broaden her horizons from her town, her village.
Yeah.
So I think maybe my appetite to grow and travel and see what else was out there probably came more from my mum than my dad. Yeah, so yeah, she got the car. In answer, what was her first car? You would never know what this is in the US at
Probably not.
all. So it was what was called a Standard 10. It was developed by British Leyland Motors, and so who have long since gone, which ultimately ended up becoming Rover, which then was owned by Honda, and then you move on to the whole GM side of the world.
Yep.
So
Uh, yeah, it's interesting. So the state where I live at, South Dakota, as you were talking about your dad, I was sitting here trying to think if it would be feasible or possible to live here and do your daily activities without having a car. And I think a lot of that actually depends on where you work and where your
go with that.
so like I have 2 kids, right? So dropping off my kids every single morning wouldn't be that difficult because their school or the daycare is only like a couple of blocks away, right? But my office compared to where my house is, I think I've never actually measured it out, but I think it's something like 10 miles away. So that in itself isn't necessarily a problem for about 6 to 8 months out of the year. But when it's negative 54, it's a little difficult to ride your bike, right? And then I'm trying to think, like, we do have buses here, right? And I have a friend of mine who actually tried to do this, where they tried to live a week with no car in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And the main point of it was that, yes, you could do it, but the amount of time wasted in sitting at a bus stop, waiting for a bus to come, and then you have to go to all these different routes where you didn't want to go. He's like, you're on average, you're spending like 4 times more time just sitting on a bus or waiting for something, or whatever it might be. So that's actually an interesting experiment that I would like to try, where for the 6 to 8 months that it's reasonable, trying that out without a car. But sorry, one other quick point on that. We've actually had a really tough winter this winter, where we've had a lot more snow. I think actually this is the most snow we've ever had ever. Like, it's record-breaking year. And we have this great bike path from my house basically to straight downtown where I work. That bike path, for the first time ever, was completely shut down for like 2 weeks because it just had like feet of snow there. And the equipment to move the snow off of that bike path is just like these tiny little tractors, like lawn garden tractors, right? And there's no way that they were going to move that snow. So there was actually people at one point walking on the road to get where they needed to go because the sidewalks were shut down, the bike paths were shut down, and so like all these cars had to just go around them, and they were walking because they had no other way to get to where they needed to go. So anyways, what were you going to say?
Well, no, I think that's great, and this is the interesting one because, as you say, I mean, obviously I've lived in the US. I lived in Colorado and in Chicago, so I know how cold it can get. Here in the UK, it's fascinating. We get 2 inches of snow and -5, and we freak out.
Yeah. I know, because I hear about it every single time.
2 inches of snow, we grind to a halt. That's this is stay at home, kids. It's dangerous out there.
Yep.
So yeah,
right around the time that I think it was early December, if I remember right. The U.S., the Midwest. Justin and I were both in Florida. The Midwest got slammed with just an apocalyptic type snowstorm, right? And then right at the same time, the UK got hit with, I think it was freezing rain and just like a little bit of snow. And you're exactly right. Like the whole city just was like, well, we don't know what to do. Hopefully everyone can fend for themselves.
Pull down the lid. We're in trouble.
Yep. Send in your version of the National Guard. I don't know what your guys' version of that is.
And it is that, Adam. I mean, and as you say, this is the beauty when you do get the opportunity to travel the world. You see those different experiences. And the thing is, I think we sometimes the car is a luxury and we enjoy it and we love it, and quite rightly so. It's a means of transport. And we've made a real habit of it. Our love and attachment to it means that we're almost blindsided to the alternatives.
Yep.
And we all experienced the COVID thing and the pressures of the global economy now, and I think it's making people think: do we need a 3-car family, or will 2 do, or if we've got 2, will 1 do? What are the? So I think people are beginning to think differently, both either in utilization or the sheer number. Do we need to be a 4-car family?
Yep. Yep.
So it's just making people think differently.
So
I hope they don't give them up, I hasten to add, otherwise we'd be out of business.
Well, I think it'll be a very cold day in hell before like both Americans and UK people give up their cars. Like, let's be honest here. Okay, so this starting off an entire regulatory body.
Yeah.
What in the world was that like? Because I mean, most people couldn't even begin to fathom starting up a business, which a regulatory body is probably kind of like a business in some ways, but you're going around and waving your finger at people and saying, no, this is the way that you need to do it. And what were the early days of that like?
This genuinely is a question I have been asked so many times, and I am so glad that I was so young and dumb when I started. Because if you ask me to do it again now, I'm not sure I'd take that. So yeah, I mean, because I really had a strong passion for safety and quality within a repair. And because there was no regulatory framework, and I did talk to many official bodies, and I was just going round the hat rack. Nobody either was interested or understood the consequences of poor repair. And we all know the insurance industry, and usually if there is an unsafe repair and it's involved in a secondary collision, are the insurance companies going to really, are they just going to deal with it as a claim, or are they going to dig deeper and find out that this was an unsafe repair? But morally, I just thought it was wrong. And so I set out, and it had to be a double-edged sword. It was a case of, if you are willing to climb on board with this initiative, there's some things we can do to help you get better. So we can show you how to improve your efficiency. We can show you how to make more profit. We can help you with any debts, bad debts. We can help you with your health and safety. So the flip side win was we give you all of these supporting role benefits. But the price is you have to be open to scrutiny. So I engaged some of the top engineers that I knew in the automotive industry at that time, and we created the business. And in short, and I will really paraphrase this, so you could join our club for 1 year, and you were going to be independently audited on your business from the front door to the back door. Your quality, your cleanliness, your operational safety, your capabilities, your capacity, your staff skills. Could they prove the skills? Not just experience, actually prove that they had gone through certificated and authentic training. So it was a front door to back door audit of the business, and we did that 5 times a year, completely unannounced.
Wow.
And the audit would last for up to 6 hours, from somebody who really knew what they were looking at. And we would extend that out. So we would go on site, we would look at a vehicle that was about to undertake repairs, one midway through repairs, and one that was ready for the handback. And we checked invoices and purchases to make sure that all the parts you've charged for, you've fitted. All the parts that you've fitted have been fitted correctly and completely to manufacturer's standards. So we did all of that. Now, if you passed all of those tests in year 1, then by year 2 you had access to all the benefits. Now, to make a clear point that I think the listeners also need to understand, Adam, at that time, we were the new kids on the block. We were creating and we were breaking new ground, but we were also harvesting a huge amount of attention because this had never been done before.
Right.
So almost the car manufacturers and the insurance companies started to pay attention. What are these guys doing? What are they up to, and why are they up to it? But they realized we were playing with a straight bat. We were doing it for all the right reasons, because there are some really good guys out there in the field who've invested their lives as well as their savings in building a great business. But there are those who are trying to cheat the system. And I felt it was wrong on every level for somebody to be able to repair a car unsafely at the same rewards as somebody who'd invested $500,000 to try and do it right or more. So I trying to restore and address the balance in that space. Within 2 years, we had over 18 UK insurance companies come to us and say, we like what you're doing. In fact, we love what you're doing. And if we can use your shops, then we will change our entire methodology and on how we supply our claims product to your businesses. And so you've now, just for a time stamp, Adam, so this was 1990, and suddenly the network of shops who were willing to show and demonstrate that they could meet the standard, it was almost like the rain from heaven was falling, because we'd had up to that point we'd had great customer, you were marketing for your own business, you were finding those customers and winning them in all the traditional ways of that time. And you went through the seasonal peak effects and the lows and everything else, and then all of a sudden it was as if everything was happening. It was non-stop. There was traffic turning up at your shop, right back in 1990. And in fairness, for I'm sure for your listeners, this was almost the beginning of DRPs. And so we created, so the first, just for clarity, first year you join. Okay, you put your name in the hat and you join. And you have to subject yourself to 5 audits. By year 2, you get all the benefits we can do to deliver to help you improve your business in every single way. And the rewards started to come from the insurance companies. Then it started to come from the manufacturers saying, okay, we actually realize that even some of our franchised, our dealer shops are not yet up to standard.
Interesting.
So they started to move their business, even saying, if you are one of these MVRA shops, then actually we feel safe. You may not be carrying the Ford Blue Oval or, but we know it's a good shop. So there was a harmony and an understanding between the car manufacturers and the insurers that this was a safe place to send their customers' vehicle. And it moved in that direction. By year 3 of membership, we started to see and measure, because we now had historical data of the shops who'd really progressed and the shops who were still dragging their heels. So we were able to introduce so many levels and metrics to either help accelerate the shop or by now penalize the shop if they were not compliant. In support, and I have to say this happened, Adam, I wish it was happening today, but the insurance company said, we're willing to reward the good shops. So now we started to get rate differentials on labor. So the more you invested, the more efficient you became, the greater the rewards. So this pyramid was being built until eventually, after year 5, you would become what was called an MVRA Centre of Excellence. And once you achieve Centre of Excellence status, then you were on everybody's radar. And that allowed, in our marketplace at that time, Adam, the guy who was a 1-shop owner suddenly became a 2, a 3, a 4, a 10, and a 15-shop owner, and the MSO was born.
Interesting.
So that was it. Now, just to close on this, I think this is where my world changed. I was a local body shop owner who decided that the world needed to change with regard to collision repair, safety, and methodologies. And in 1991, as this traffic started to happen, I was contacted by a very, very good friend of mine now, a long-term friend of mine, but I didn't know him at the time, was a gentleman by the name of Bruce Cooley, who worked for Sherwin-Williams. And he'd heard the story and he said, Mike, we've got to get you across to the US. We've got to try and get this done. And that's when I started to meet many of who today I can regard as close friends, from across the pond, me coming over to you, and sort of saying we could do this and that. The one significant difference was scale. The scale of the US compared to the scale of the UK. So we could move things very quickly over here because we had sort of one set of regulatory constraints. We didn't have federal or county, it was, and I would say it certainly was not simple, Anna, but it was probably easier to fast track this. But the fascination was there, and obviously since then and over the years, I've seen those adaptations of what the MVRA created with Assured Performance and Verifax and the 5-star programs and all the different things that emerged, but they emerged off the back of what the MVRA did in 1990.
Interesting. Why do you think that back when you guys were starting this, why do you think that the insurance companies were interested in making sure that the repairs were done correctly? Is it because a lot of people in this industry have a certain opinion of insurance companies, and it is, basically the only thing they care about is making more money, or whatever it might be. So what was it that you were seeing on their end that was making them interested in making sure that these repairs were done correctly?
Oh, Adam, that's such a great question, and one that I am genuinely happy to answer, and maybe try and dispel some of the myths around that. So, if we take for a second what I've just said, you've got good. Let's for ease of this conversation, let's say you've got good shops and bad shops, and we know we've got everything in between.
Yep.
But a bad shop would be charging exactly the same as a good shop.
Yep.
So the insurance companies felt, hang on a minute, we are being ripped off. We're paying for a great service, but we're not getting it.
Yep.
And we're seeing our claims costs go north. The irony was, what we were able to do within a few short years was we were able to prove that the very best shops with the best equipment, the best techs, and the best efficiencies could actually reduce the repair cost while being better rewarded.
Interesting.
And we proved that 1,000,000 times over. And so we started to get some real traction in that space. And the tragedy came without question that, and I will be honest with your listeners, it was sadly and tragically insurer greed that undid it all again. We had some real forward thinkers at that time, trying to break them all, trying to break with all these old traditions, trying to find better ways. And there was a generation that came around that had the authority and the autonomy to make key decisions, even within a corporate structure. But I think by the time we hit the mid-2000s, it was almost like every decision is taken from the top and everybody else is a minion. And it was about, how do we squeeze the pips out of this? And eventually so by this time, and I think this is something your listeners will pay attention to and find interesting. So let me just very quickly point a quick roadmap. So when I first started MVRA in the UK, our collision repair market was worth £5 billion a year. Okay? So, and there was 26,000 body shops in the UK at that time. By the time MVRA had run for 5 years, a lot of the bad shops had closed down or gone out of business, or the good guys had consumed them, became MSOs, multi-sites and everything else. But that number within 5 years had reduced from 26,000 down to 7,000.
Wow, that's crazy.
Now, if you look at the UK today, our market repair cap today is still, despite all technologies and advanced technologies and ADAS and ABS and all these things, our market today is still worth 4.7 billion.
Interesting.
But today we have less than 3,000 shops in the UK.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, this number that you're pulling, the 4.7 billion.
Yeah.
is this due to, one of the other things that gets talked about a lot is that there's fewer accidents nowadays than there was previously. Does that play a big role in that number?
It's I think rather than confusing any of your listeners, it's not a simple question because there's lots of different anomalies in that. However, I think the best answer I can give, Adam, in that is yes, the accident frequency has dropped. Equally, the accident severity has dropped.
Okay.
However, what hasn't is the price of materials has grown significantly.
Right.
And now with radar, lidar, so the claims cost is still accelerating enormously, even though we are repairing less vehicles. But, and this is the big but, now there are less shops. The shops here have never had it so good. There are no lean times.
Yeah.
And I think what I read and understand, and I mean, our real dilemma right now is over this sort of maybe this 25-year journey, we are hitting some major hurdles right now, and that those hurdles are resource, skills, some of the softer skills, not the hard skills. The technical skills, we can pretty much master that. We've been repairing cars for a long time.
Yeah.
But the management skills, the leadership skills, the supervisory, the administrative skills is not catching up as fast as it needs to, and that's because we've not addressed it adequately for 20 years.
Yep.
I find it fascinating that we readily accept that we can take a junior on and take him through his apprenticeship for maybe 3 or 4 years, and then we've got a guy who's been in the shop for 20 years and suddenly he's getting a little bit frustrated, a bit long in the tooth, so we don't want to lose him, so we offer him an extra couple of thousand more to keep him, but we promote him to manager. He has never been a manager. He has never been trained to be a manager. He doesn't understand human dynamics, conflict management, recruitment, process, so he's almost like thrown to the lions, despite his experience. So we now have an aging demographic. The average age of a technician now, Adam, in the UK is 47.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're not bringing in the new blood. So we've changed all of the cost silos within the shop. So when you have this, the 16-year-old, the 19-year-old, the 21, 24, 27, who'd become a master tech, and, so that, and you could shift and move your shop according to skill and revenue. Now we've loaded the cart to the heavy end. So it's creating some real pressures, and one of the biggest pressures we have right now is resource.
Yeah. There's some really interesting parallels between mechanics and the body shop world.
Yeah.
And this is coming from someone who I used to wrench on cars as a profession, and one of the things that was told to me, and if you look back in history, was something kind of similar to what you're talking about right now. There used to be mechanic shops everywhere.
Yeah.
And your skill wasn't necessarily dependent upon how well you repaired a car. It was actually more about just like how you hustled and how hard you worked and everything like that, right? Because everyone could there were so many people that could do your job.
Yeah.
Because everyone could change spark plugs, everyone could change oil. Like, it wasn't really necessarily skill based. However, what ended up happening was when computers came around, all of a sudden it just filtered everyone out of it in the late, let's just say the late 80s. Now you had guys that were like, these computer systems, I don't know what's going on, like just blah, 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 blah. Right? Well, then the industry progressed, but the people did not. Their technical skills did not. And so it started just to naturally funnel and filter down into started weeding out shops that, there just wasn't enough old cars around for them to stay busy, blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting that now with the MVRA, you kind of had something similar, which is, we are setting the bar here. And if you're not going to hit that bar, you're going to be filtered out of it. Now, there's a lot of people that could argue whether or not that's the right or wrong way to do it. But the other thing that's I think is kind of interesting that plays a role today, but maybe not necessarily back then, is that with mechanic shops, if you don't repair something correctly, you usually find out about it pretty fast. If you don't rebuild an engine correctly, like within the first couple of startups, you're going to know if you messed up or not. But if you don't repair an accident correctly, it could go hundreds, thousands of miles, years without ever being caught necessarily. And the only way that the average consumer would ever know that something isn't repaired correctly is if it wasn't painted correctly, so the paint flies off, or if there's water intrusion, or if rust all of a sudden bubbles up after a couple of years. But at that point, the car's usually changed hands, or it's gone somewhere else, or people just chalk it up to old age or whatever. So what I find really interesting is if you don't have these checkpoints early or in the actual repair process, it's easy for you to kind of slide underneath the radar until there's another accident. And then when a crush zone hasn't been repaired correctly, that the only time you get penalized is 5 years down the road when you've had another accident. And the difficult part about the body shop industry is there's no what's the best way to put it? There's no real reoccurring revenue from the same customer. Unless you have just the worst driver ever who's just getting into constant little fender benders in parking lots just all the time, year after year, right? At which point their insurance has probably filtered them out from driving a car because they're making so many claims. But what I'm getting at is normally the average person's only having an accident like once every couple of years or a couple of times in their life. So the chances of that mistake ever getting caught is just so absurdly low. So I just find it so interesting that as mechanics, normally there is a lot of pressure and accountability to doing it the right way, because if you don't repair brakes correctly, you're going to know pretty quickly if you don't do it right. And, you'll just kill someone straight away. But in an accident repair, you could go thousands of miles, tens of thousands of miles, or years without ever having the consequence of not repairing that correctly. Does that all kind of make sense to you?
100% makes sense. And there's a few key elements in what you just said, Adam, that I wouldn't be aggressive enough to say challenge, but I think there was. And I had many battles, as you can imagine, when shots were accusing either myself personally or the MVRA for affecting their business and their livelihoods. And that was not what I was intentionally trying to do. But what I would not accept is how many people have to die because you couldn't repair it well. Because to your point, no, we may never know. We may never know what was the cause of the accident. But the one thing you can be certain of, if it isn't repaired safely and it is involved in a secondary collision and the airbag doesn't go off, or it didn't steer, or the brakes didn't work, these are the things that were born of incompetence. Not maliciously, but born of incompetence. And I don't wear that. At the end of the day, every single shop in the UK had the chance to prove their validity in repairing. And it was to address that one fundamental issue. If you are going to open a cosmetics business or a surgery business and everything else, a dental practice, I'm sure as hell want to know that you've been trained before you start pulling things out my mouth. So if we are ever going to be recognized as an aspirational industry, a truly professional industry, then we have to put our house in order.
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to do.
Did you have? Can you think off the top of your head of a shop? You obviously don't have to name them, but they were like the redheaded stepchild, where they did everything wrong. They couldn't repair a car correctly if they wanted to, but they had the ambition and the want to improve, and they did over time and invested a lot of energy into doing that.
So many, so many, and what a great question, Anna, because this is where all the excitement came from. Under the pyramid system that we built, because they could join, they had that appetite. They say, look, I may not be the finished article yet, but I really want to be. Okay, we could paint them a picture for what that future could look like. We would then give them the advice, the guidance, shop layout, floor layout, equipment, what you're going to do, how to train your techs, where you're going to train your techs. So we would guide them holistically to become the best they could be. And this was not about whether you was a 40,000 square foot shop or a 6,000 square foot shop. It was about just being brilliant at what you do, because everybody has their relative customer audience. It may well be that you didn't need insurance or DRP type work. You may just do retail, have your local shop, your local business, and grow it the traditional old-fashioned way. But they should still be done safely. And yeah, there was an awful lot of shops a lot of shops even today, can still turn out a shiny piece of metal, but it ain't safe. So we introduce welding quality standards and things like that. Now, direct answer to your question, I won't name, but I can tell you, you don't have to look too far in the UK market today who can see some of our most leading shops today were one of the MVRA's one shop mom and pop businesses who now are 16 site or 24 site MSOs.
Wow, that's crazy.
They've gone from maybe a $300,000 turnover to a $45 million turnover. And that's because their passion, their determination, their vision, whatever you want to call it, their ambition was just, this is my world, and I want to be good at it. And so it was a game changer. Today, many other bodies have superseded what MVRA did. MVRA ended in 2009, tragically, as I say, but it was. But others have championed that cause since. I don't think it's as good, and I'm probably bound to say that, but I genuinely know it isn't. But we didn't let the ball drop. We still have high regulated standards here. The insurance companies will still only direct work to recognised and authenticated shops. And it's not just about price. It's safety and quality first, and the price comes next. But now the better shops are better rewarded. So a lot of what we laid the groundwork for is still true today.
Do you think that? I'm trying to think of my question here. The soft skills that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that in service-based businesses, doesn't matter what the service is, this is something that's sorely lacking. Because what you kind of pointed out earlier is people in service-based businesses tend to get promoted because they do their job well, which on one hand, you should be rewarded for that. But you're stepping into a role in a position that your technical skills are no longer what is necessary for you to be awesome at that. It is your soft skills. It's your leadership. It's your motivation. It's how you improve other people. And it's really unfortunate to say this, but most of the time, the people who are really good at their job are usually make the worst teachers, because they get so frustrated with looking at another individual and just saying, why don't you get this? Like, just do it. Just do it, and do it faster and do it better. And what is, I feel, it seems like now you're heavy into that world where you're really championing how to improve these soft skills. But what are some of the things that you have seen that the auto body industry really needs to be focusing on, as far as like materials to read or classes to take and stuff like that, to really take them to that next level?
Adam, this is my, if you will, my new quest, that I champion, and you're 100% right. And I will say sometimes it breaks my heart, because I was, as you say, you had some great techs, and vastly experienced, and they do either get the promotion and everything else. And no, they're not designed or equipped. They're designed and equipped to repair cars. They're designed and equipped to flow cars. But suddenly, as I say, they're thrown into this arena, where it's far more political, it's far more sensitive. You're dealing with the human animal and emotions and behaviors and performance. And suddenly you're stepping into an arena where you were their friend yesterday, you were their work buddy yesterday. Today, you're marking their homework. And it's an uncomfortable transition, and it's almost like we just pluck them from one and throw them into the other, and they're just not prepared. So what I do see, Adam, in direct answer to your question, is that we don't plan these things well enough across the industry. We don't anticipate them. We don't have a strategy for this. It's almost, instead of responding to a known set of parameters, we just react to the moment. Oh my God, we've got a crisis, boom, do this. And it's almost like a lose-win-lose scenario. You lose because you take one of your best guys off the floor. He wins for a short term because he got the pay lift. But the minute he's now out of his known comfort zone, he loses because he now feels like a failure. His teammates don't admire him anymore. In fact, they criticize him. They mock him. And eventually one of your best guys leaves. And worse than leaves you, he may even leave the industry. And that's the tragedy that has to be addressed. And this is no silver bullet quick fix. We've not been doing this well for over 20 years. So this is not, pull out the magic one time. This is right now. You have to have a strategic plan for moving and transitioning and developing your people, not just in the technical arena. You've got to look at the whole tree. Which branch do they want to go down? Which branch are they equipped to go down? Have we done any of the psychometrics to find out what their aptitude and attitude is to these things? So it's a time in our industry with technical advances in the product. If we don't use the same technical advances in our assessment of our human resource, we'll continue to make mistakes. It's time for our industry to bring science into this arena and realize that we're moving from a craft-based industry into a highly technical industry.
Yeah. A personal story of mine, and I've told this story before on this podcast, so I'm sure people are just craving to hear it again, but one of the so I this is when I was a diesel mechanic, but one of the shops I worked at was just this very large construction company that just had this massive fleet of equipment that needed to be taken care of, right? Well, just their semi-trucks alone, the semi-trucks, or lorries as you guys call them, they had 85 of those.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even beginning to talk about how many excavators, payloaders, and everything else that they had, right? And I was in charge of all the semi-trucks. The 85 were mine to take care of. And my shop manager was a guy by the name of Peanut. And Peanut, exactly what we were talking about, got into his shop manager role simply because he was the oldest seniority type dude. But the guy didn't even have a clue how to manage multiple people. Had absolutely no idea. He had no idea how to do paperwork. He had no idea how to, just had zero idea how to manage people in the first place. Now, he was a great dude. He was a, you could tell the guy was trying, but he had a problem with drinking. I don't know if he probably doesn't know this to this day, but there are several times where we knew the guy was drinking before he came to work because the pressures on him were just so stupidly unrealistic, right? And the interesting part is that is a clear-cut case of, well, you've been here the longest and you're the one that knows the most, so you're just going to lead these people and you're going to manage them and divvy out jobs and everything like that. And he was just so poorly equipped to do it, and by no fault of his own. Now, this memory of mine will live on with me for the rest of my life because it's a clear indication of a company trying to fake their way into fixing the problem. At one point, the situation got so bad that the company decided to hire some sort of like, it was a consultant, right, to put processes and procedures into place. And one of the things that she did was she asked everyone to come into the office, have an hour-long meeting, and sit down as to what they thought was wrong with the shop and what needed to improve. And I'm like, yes, finally, we're moving forward. Like, we're going to figure out some of these inconsistencies that need to get figured out. And so I actually took it upon myself to kind of talk to a couple of people, got out a notepad, and started writing down what everyone kind of thought was the worst areas of the shop and what needed the most improvement. I'll never forget this, Mike. I went to go sit down into the meeting, and we had a little bit of chit-chat, and she goes, okay, so, let me know what you think needs to be improved in the shop. I pull out my notepad, set it down, and she started laughing. She's like, oh my God, you have an entire notepad? And I was like, and at that moment, I realized, okay, this is all a farce. Like, why would you make fun of, or why would you criticize someone that's actually done some of your job, someone who's in the lower ranks of and went through the effort of talking to people, figuring out what needs to be done, and then you criticize that person for trying to go above and beyond what their role is and trying to fix these things. And it was so amazing because it was at that moment that we were like 72 hours into this whole experiment, right? It was at that moment that I instantly went into FU mode and said, I'm not going to do shit. Like, everything that you guys are trying to do, I'm actually going to go the opposite direction, and I'm going to just absolutely just railroad everything. And that's not the right attitude to have, right? That is the exact opposite attitude. I should have checked my ego, but I was young. I was like 22, 23 at the time, something like that. But it's just, the reason why I tell that story is that for multiple different reasons. One, elevating your most senior guy in the most technical guy that you have in your shop can work, but that's a rare individual. That's a really rare individual to have someone who has both the technical skills and the soft skills to be able to do that job. And number two, when you have younger people in your industry that a lot of times do want these better working environments, don't sit there and let them talk about what they think is what is needed in the shop. They might have a whole different viewpoint and have a fresh set of eyes that you've never thought about. And you need to check your own ego and say, man, shit, okay, maybe this 20-something-year-old guy actually has some good points. Is what he's saying real? What's your thoughts on that?
Wow. Adam, sometimes my blood runs cold when I hear stories like that, because I know this almost might sound like textbook 101, and I've consulted for many body shops and businesses over the year, and it is that I'm a consultant myself, so I can't be anti-consultant, but it's what you kind of, at the end of the day, the early steps of transition have to come from the top.
Mm-hmm.
And the business owner, if things aren't working, it has to be clear where he's going, what he wants. And if you are ever going to address a team, you've got to really understand the fundamentals of human nature. If you want to change something, all your team are going to be going, that's okay, but what's in it for me?
Yep.
So you've got to start from there. You've got to make them feel that what it is you are asking of them in this change cycle is going to bring real benefits to them. If not, why change?
Yep.
And if you do not get them on board, you will find them pushing you. They will find every way to undo your strategy. They will find every way to undo your performance metrics. So it is all of that. So we get too many things wrong. The other side of that is, you say this promotional escalation is a case of we really do, Adam, have to do much more. We've got to find out, what are their hopes and dreams? What do they want? Is this the job? What does the job mean? And I have many, many times had these conversations with business owners and say, well, okay, so define for me what this role of senior manager is. Mm-hmm. And they can't.
Yep.
They'll take a stab in the dark at it, but they cannot define it. So I say, so what you're going to do, you're going to take this guy, your best guy, and you're going to put him into this role that you cannot define. So this is now a moving target for him to hit. He doesn't know what good looks like. So you're going to measure him every single day. And if on that day you're not in the best of mood, you're going to judge him accordingly. And you're going to fail him.
Yep.
And he's going to go, what did I fail? And you're going to go, I don't know, but you just did.
Yep.
And tomorrow we'll move it again.
Yep.
I'm going to keep you so on your freaking toes, you're going to wonder what the hell is happening every day. And you kill and burn out your best talent. Yep. Because they can never hit that target because they don't know where the target is.
And what you're referring to, and I'm sorry if I'm kind of maybe putting some pieces of the puzzle together, you're talking about KPIs or key performance indicators. Like, okay, what does winning look like to this person? Can we agree on that? What does bad look like? What is it? What does success look like in this role?
Wow. Okay. I'd make one key point there, Adam.
Yeah.
There's two levels.
It's your podcast.
There's two levels. There's two levels, and they are synergistical. It really is that thing that I've got to know what it is you want as the business owner so I can hit that target. But I need you to understand how I feel, what I need from this experience. And it isn't always about the paycheck. It's about I need to feel valued. I need to feel loved. And as we move forward, Adam, in this industry, and we're changing the demographic and the age, and we're bringing in, the Gen Y and the Gen Z type, our industry, Adam, maybe this is not a good answer, but our industry, stereotypically, from the old school of thinking was, if we were under pressure or we needed to keep those KPIs, it was work longer, harder, and faster.
Yep.
Those days are gone. They're done. They are done. Anybody who thinks they're not done, wake up. Those days are done. This is absolutely today. We have got a new generation who are saying, if you think I'm going to be doing 54 hours a week, think again.
Yeah.
And I ain't working weekends, and I want more holidays, and I want, and then the old guards start going, well, that's not acceptable. We can't hit this. Then change your processes, change your methods, change your business model, and think about changing your people, because at the end of the day, it's if you're thinking long term, if you're thinking, where is my business going in the next 30 years, start planning it now.
Yeah, because it's all well and good to say, oh, well, these kids are lazy and they don't work hard and all these other things, which, sorry, from my point of view and from what I've seen, it is very untrue. It's just that they have different goals in life, and sometimes, you don't agree with that. But here's something that I've pointed out to several older business owners. Okay, go ahead. Don't agree with it. What are you going to do in 20 years when you have no workforce? Like it or not, they set what you have to do. So you can be as upset about it as you want to. And that's not to say that you need to get... If you have a lazy Gen Z person, guess what? There was lazy people back in the 70s too. You fired them.
Amen.
Like, you fired them. Like, you just got rid of them. Not everybody is a hard worker. Just end of. Like, there is lazy people in every single generation. It's so funny to me how, and I don't mean to include you in this, but older generations of people look back on everything with rose-colored glasses and say, well, everyone worked hard. Oh, really? Hippies weren't a thing? Like, are we really going to say that hippies weren't a thing? Because that was in the 60s and 70s, which, correct me if I'm wrong, that's your generation or the previous generation to you. Like, back in the 40s, we had guys that didn't want to go to war. They were scared to go to war. And guess what? We called them lazy and cowards and all these other things, right? So, like, laziness has always been a part of the conversation. And you fired those people and you moved on. You found people who were good and hardworking, and then you worked to get them to what your standards in your business were. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, the people who are dictating what those standards are is kind of flowing in the other direction.
And that's a fact. I agree with you. I mean, I don't need to echo what you've just said because you said it so well. And the thing is, if you are, we don't think, our industry is largely and has been conditioned to reacting. Is it going to, because if I lost the guy, all I needed to do was put an advert, and another guy who was slightly pissed off would cross the road and bring his toolbox with him. So my downtime was barely one day. And so those times have gone. So, but you're right. The motivation, the engagement, the inspiration that for the next generation, you have to create the environment. This environment of psychological safety where they feel open to challenge, they feel open to question. And a lot of the old guard don't like to be challenged or questioned. Yep, so we're creating a brand new world. We are creating a brand new world. And if we ignore that, you will be one of the casualties. Because to your absolute point, if you may wake up one morning and you don't have a workforce.
Mm-hmm. I've said this before on the podcast, but one of my downfalls, or I don't think it's a downfall. And on the outside looking in, other people say it's not a downfall until I'm the person asking you why. Why are we doing it this way? Why do you guys do it that way? What's the reasoning behind this process? Why have you tried it this way? Why is it that we can't try it this way? Blah, blah, blah. I can't tell you how many older people, just look at me and say, well, that's just the way we've always done it. Okay, but, like, can we try it this way? Because, like, I'm not seeing from my viewpoint right now why we can't try it that way. We're not going to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, blah, blah, blah. Like, and it could very well be faster. Well, no, that's just never the way we've done it. And I can't tell you how many times that's gotten me into trouble. Both with law enforcement officers, with neighbors. I love the question why, because the reason why I love the question why is generally you can only ask why about 2 or 3 times, and then people get really frustrated, and they go, well, that's just the way it's always been. And the reason why they say that is because all of a sudden you have now helped them uncover the fact that they don't actually know the reason why they do that. They have no idea. They have no basis for it. That's just the way it is. And this is including in my businesses. Yeah. I have people, if someone asks me something why 2 to 3 times and I can't get past the third why, and it sets off a little alarm. I'm like, shit, I actually don't have any idea why we do it this way. And then I get mad at myself and I'm like, you idiot, how did you not see this?
You didn't prepare well enough for this.
I didn't prepare well enough. And then I just tell them, like, shit, that's a good question. You know what? Maybe we should reevaluate this.
Do you know, Adam, you've triggered something in my mind during that part of the conversation, and I don't know whether this will come across well enough on a podcast, but many years ago, and I stand by this, I made a presentation across your side of the pond. I think it was at a SEMA or a NACE event, and I put up a slide. And I divided the whole of the industry, and this is wherever I've travelled in the world. The whole of the industry, and I know it's a generalisation, but so forgive me for that, but I think it hits the mark. I think 5% of all body shops in any country get it. They're good at the math, they're good at the process, they know where they're going, where they're heading, what's required. 5% just get it. Mm-hmm. And I call those the polar bears. They're just sole predatory animal. They know what they're doing. They know how to hunt, and they go do it. And then I said there are 15% of shops, which I categorized as wolves. They'll hunt in packs. They sniff the breeze. They see what's going. They're agile. They're capable of bringing down a kill. They're good at what they do. They are really good at what they do. But they don't always just do quite enough to be that ultimate predator. And then there is 25% of the shops. And 25% of the shops go their merry way. I call them the dogs. They're loyal, loving, faithful, kind, nice, but they're static. They're not really going anywhere. And then tragically, there's 55% of the market I call chickens. And they just run around like they've had their heads cut off, clucking and wondering what the hell's going on in the world and why it's everybody else's fault.
That's actually really not all that surprising to me.
Yeah.
So I have been in business for myself since I was 25. And I'm 33 now. And there is a shocking amount. What those numbers that you kind of outlined basically kind of falls in line with how many businesses succeed nationally. Doesn't matter what the business is after 5 years.
Yeah.
It's a really small percentage of businesses, doesn't matter what it is, that actually succeed past 5 years.
Yeah.
So, but those ones that do succeed, they actually start to even get broken out even more into these smaller percentages of people of those businesses that just continuously keep growing, grinding, and growing, right?
Yeah.
And what's so interesting is I've talked to so many different business owners across so many different aspects of business that the last 15 years, let's say pre-2020, the last 15 years were relatively, well, let's just say a decade, 10, 12 years. The last 10, 12 years were easy. There was, in the marketplace, there was no global national just squeeze, and it was gonna take you for everything that it was worth, right? It was relatively easy. And for a lot of business owners, this recession that we're in right now globally is the first time they've ever gotten punched in the face repeatedly, over and over again. This is the first time they've gone up against Mike Tyson in the ring, and all they had to do was to keep their wits about them and put their guard up and just take blow after blow after blow after blow. And those I would probably argue those 5 to 15% that you were talking about are the ones that they say to themselves, okay, we got to batten down the hatches. We just have to take these blows, because guess what? After every recession, you come out of it. Normally a recession on average takes about 3 years or so ish, like something like that, depending on the severity. And then you have a year and then 2 years of like, you're kind of like, oh shit, we might be getting out of this. Like we're good. And then all of a sudden it just takes off like a freaking rocket. Globally, that's usually the way that it goes. Would you say that you're in agreement or disagreement, or what would you?
No, there's a strong agreement with that. I mean, I say, and you add into that mix that we globally have come through COVID, and that's added a dimension to our thinking and to the economics of any business that we were ill prepared for.
Yep.
So I wrote an article some time ago in one of our UK industry magazines, and the title was "A Perfect Storm." So I've been in this industry 47 years, Adam, and we are experiencing now the most combined set of unique circumstances. We've had variants and, bits of shortages here, parts issues and everything else, but not this perfect storm.
Right.
Where we have labor shortages and skills. We have part shortages and skills. We're experiencing what we're going to do with green parts. We're doing all these things. We've got changing technologies. We've got a shrinking vehicle park. And you look at all of those things, claims costs, and as you say, we also, if you look at the economics of that environment, so your words, and happy to use your words, so you see the consumer now dangerously having to push their deductible higher and higher and higher and higher, and then all of a sudden, God forbid, there is an incident and I can't afford my deductible.
Yep.
So now we start losing those shops that would have been one of our repairs, now starts to look under the arches to find somebody who can just maybe get it going again. Yep. So we've opened the door to risk one more time, because we have this perfect storm. So where I do wholeheartedly echo your statement is that the real top guys are still going to have it tough, but they're more adept at sensing it, and they've prepared for it, or they can adjust more rapidly to the changing environment. Now, for those who can't adjust, law of the jungle, those who cannot adapt to the environment ain't going to make it. Yep. And those that do, the survivors, come out stronger every time.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
We unfortunately have to kind of wrap this up, but on that point, the final point that I would like to make is I think we're coming out of it now. It might not feel like it might not seem like it, but I think this winter was the last real cold winter that we're going to have. I think that we're in the transition period now, where this next year to 2 years is going to be, things are going to start kind of creeping along and doing okay. But I think after year 2 from now, which hopefully I still do this podcast so I can reference back to it, but I think what you see in 2025 is we're all going to be sitting here talking about how the global market is exploding and interest rates are going down and blah, 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 blah. Your guys' pound is like worth so much more than the dollar now, like, because you guys took a beating when it came to the conversion rate here, actually not that long ago. And I know Brexit probably didn't help you guys really a whole lot with that, but yeah, Mike, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this today. Really appreciate your insights. Fascinating talk. And where can people find out more about you or follow along with you to get more of this just great information?
LinkedIn is one of my main channels, but I'm also on Facebook with Automotivate. So LinkedIn or Facebook, you'll find me there, or I've got my website as well. So awesome. You'll find me those. Adam, it's been a joy, and I'm sure, I hope the listeners have enjoyed it and will be able to take something from it, because it is a subject that we obviously both care passionately about, and we could probably spend forever on the subject. But yeah, I would like to say, Adam, one last thing, because it resonates with what you've just said, and that is, I am telling my clients here and now that if they get through this and they do the right things now, I don't think there has ever been a time where there will be a better future. I think we're going to be fixing cars for a long time to come, whether it's hydrogen, EV, whatever it happens to be, or whether it's fossil fuel power. We're still going to do it. We've got a phenomenal future in this industry.
Yep.
This is the time to capitalize on it.
Totally agree, because the one thing they haven't figured out how to safety guard yet is human stupidity.
There you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike, so much. I appreciate your time.
It's been a joy. Thank you.